that I said that there would be refreshments. There are not going to be refreshments. I'm afraid. No. Well, I tried to get it organised, but unfortunately they wouldn't allow me because this is too nice a hall, apparently. So I think we'll just dive straight into it. It shouldn't be more than an hour and a half, I think, so hope you enjoy. Jesus in India. Jesus Christ is one of the most controversial figures in human history. The Abrahamic faiths of the world each hold three different views about him. For the world of Judaism, Jesus was an impostor. For the Christians, he was the Son of God, the third part of the divine essence. And for the Muslims, he is one of the most revered prophets of God, yet he is a man and no more than a man. These three different views to this day shape and change the politics, beliefs, minds, and economics of the world. It is therefore deeply important that the historical reality of Jesus' life and death be investigated and ascertained. The points of difference between people about Jesus almost all stem from the scene of the crucifixion, and so if we are to reach the reality of Jesus, the crucifixion should be the centre of our attention. For the one unacquainted with the details of the crucifixion, a brief narrative of the events as related by the Gospels is necessary. The scene opens on Jesus praying in the Garden of Gethsemane in the words, "O Abba," or Father, take this bitter cup of death away from me, not as I will, but as you will. He rebukes his followers 3 times for sleeping instead of praying with him at such a perilous time. His heart-rending prayer is uttered with such agony of the soul that it is metaphorically said to turn his sweat into blood. Soon after, the Roman army come and arrest him. The disciples flee. The follower is convinced of Jesus' innocence, and he marvels at Jesus' steadfastness in the face of the many accusations levelled against him. Pilate's wife also testifies to Jesus' innocence when she sends her husband a message in the middle of the court proceedings, telling him most emphatically to have nothing to do with that innocent man, for I have suffered many things last night in my dreams because of him. The judge Pilate then seeks to free Jesus through a clever device. He gives the opponents of Jesus the option of releasing one of 2 people. Jesus, who is found innocent of the charges of rebellion and blasphemy, or Barabbas, the insurgent. Thinking that his opponents would never choose Barabbas, the insurgent, over Jesus, Pilate sets up this encounter. The opponents, however, adamant that Jesus be crucified, choose Barabbas to be saved instead. After the opponents choose Barabbas, Pilate famously washes his hands of Jesus' blood. Jesus is handed over to the Roman guards. He is scourged and mocked at before being led to the site of the crucifixion. He is nailed to the cross along with 2 thieves on either side of him. He is offered wine mixed with gall so as to lessen the pain, but he refuses. Soon afterwards, the sun is darkened by a storm, and after being on the cross for 3 hours, 3 to 6 hours, Jesus cries out, "Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" A sponge soaked in vinegar is applied to his lips, and soon his head slumps down. His opponents ask Pilate to hasten his death by breaking his legs. This technique means that the victim cannot rest their legs on a small ledge provided, and, hanging only by their arms, quickly die. In line with this, the legs of the 2 robbers are broken and they die. Jesus' legs, however, are not broken, because his head is slumped and they take him to be already dead. The centurion, in order to elicit a response from Jesus, and thus determine whether he is truly dead or not, cuts his side with a spear. Blood and water begin to gush out. Jesus, however, does not make any noise or response to the pain of the cut, and so is taken for dead. Joseph of Arimathea, a wealthy disciple of Jesus, goes to Pilate and demands Jesus' body. Pilate exclaims surprise that Jesus has died so quickly after only being on the cross for a few hours. Pilate hands the body over to Joseph, and Joseph and Nicodemus, another disciple, take the body to a large airy burial chamber in which he is laid. There they apply a healing ointment of myrrh and aloes to Jesus' body. Jesus' opponents go to Pilate and ask for his body. Pilate asks them that he no longer has it, but that it is in the sepulchre owned by Joseph of Arimathea. The opponents then ask Pilate to station guards outside the sepulchre in case the body should be taken away by stealth, and the disciples of Jesus may claim that he had risen from the dead. Pilate tells them that he will not station any guards, but they should make some arrangement themselves. The opponents thereafter stationed their own guards outside the sepulchre, and, in the dewy mist of Sunday morning, another earthquake shakes the land. The guards, stationed outside the sepulchre, see a figure clad in white robes descending from the nearby mountain, and taking it to be a terrifying angel who is bringing on the earthquake, flee from the tomb. The guards watch from afar as the angel is seen to roll away the large boulder covering the mouth of the sepulchre. Later on, several disciples come to the sepulchre and find that Jesus' body is no longer in it. Stupefied, they also flee. Only Mary Magdalene stays behind, and she is the first to see Jesus again. He is dressed as a gardener. She recognizes him and then flees to the disciples to tell them the good news. Soon after, he meets the disciples, shows them his wounds, and eats with them. 8 days later, Jesus visits the disciples again, this time with Thomas present. Thomas is called Doubting Thomas, for he refuses to believe that Jesus is present before him until he sees Jesus face to face, and even thrusts his hands into his wounds, which are still very much conspicuous on his wrists. Jesus rejects the suggestion of the disciples to present himself to his opponents, but instead travels 100 miles to Galilee under the cover of night. Thereafter, he is not seen in that area of the world ever again. The commonly held belief is that he ascended to heaven, but this is recorded in only 2 of the 4 Gospels, and is only found in Gospels dating from 200 AD onwards. None of the manuscripts of the Gospels prior to 200 AD have any mention whatsoever of the ascension to heaven. There are, moreover, no eyewitnesses. In 1899, in a small village of the Punjab, India, a man named Mirza Ghulam Ahmad wrote a book, the translation of which is Jesus in India, in which he showed from the Gospels, the Quran, medical literature, historical records, oral traditions, Hindu and Buddhist scriptures, and circumstantial evidence that Jesus did not die on the cross, but only fell into a faint, recovered in the sepulchre under the healing effect of myrrh and aloes, made the journey to Galilee in his wounded body, did not ascend to heaven, but travelled east towards India and Tibet, where he lived and eventually died. His tomb can be visited and seen even today, and is located in the Khanyara quarter of Srinagar, Kashmir, India. I will now proceed to enumerate 8 arguments in support of this assertion. Perhaps the strongest testimony that Jesus survived the crucifixion is the prophecy of Jesus himself. When his opponents continued to demand a heavenly sign from him, he replied that no sign would be shown to a wicked generation, except for the sign of Jonah. For as Jonah, he began, was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. Matthew chapter 12, verse 40. The story of the prophet Jonah is well known. Having been rejected by his people, he boarded a ship to leave them behind. The ship was caught in a storm, and Jonah was thrown from the boat. He was swallowed up by a whale, and it is said in the Bible that he spent 3 days and nights in its belly. But upon the 4th day, he was thrown out and cast upon land. At no point did Jonah die. The miracle of Jonah was that against heavy odds, he managed to survive. The miracle of Jonah, therefore, is one of survival, not resurrection. For Jesus to die on the cross and yet still claim the miracle of Jonah as his miracle is a contradiction, for as Mirza Ghulam Ahmad writes, what resemblance could there be between the dead and the living? The second evidence we find also in the Gospels themselves, that Jesus did not want to die upon the cross, is evident from the fact that he spent the entire night before in prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane, praying, Father or Abba, if thou be willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. Luke chapter 22, verse 42. He even admonished his disciples for sleeping with him, and sleeping at such a perilous time, and told them to rise up and pray with him. This is not all. In fact, the acceptance of this prayer is expressly mentioned in the Bible, in chapter 5, verse 7 of Hebrew, when he had offered up prayers and supplications with strong crying and tears unto him that was able to save him from death, and was heard because of his piety. The cry of Jesus while he was on the cross, recorded by Matthew in chapter 27, verse 46 of, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" is very important. This cry clearly points to the promise that God had made to Jesus that his prayer had been accepted and that he would not die upon the cross. Indeed, the word forsaken actually implies that Jesus had been promised